this building, Florida television began.
And good evening, South Florida, and welcome to what is truly a special night for all of us, and we hope for you as well. I'm Tony Segreto.
And I'm Jennifer Volpe. WTVJ is proud to be celebrating 50 years of serving this community. As we look back tonight, we're also looking ahead to a new home and a new millennium and serving each and every one of you for at least 50 more years.
At least. Now, to understand where we're going, you have to see how it all began. It was March 21st, 1949. A small tower on top of Miami's Everglades Hotel, which still stands today, was about to bring many of you and your families your first taste of television.
Sky 6, in fact, is live over our current home, 316 North Miami Avenue in the heart of downtown Miami. It looks a whole lot different now. Tonight, we're going to look back on the pioneers who started it all and how they did it.
Florida's first television station made history once again this morning, breaking ground on this community's first digital state-of-the-art facility. We're going to tell you what that means to you, the viewer, coming up in just a few minutes. You know, when we signed on exactly 50 years ago tonight, WTVJ was the 16th television station in the country.
Mind-boggling to think of it. Few people have worked at this station and seen as many changes as our own Bob Weaver.
He's joined by our senior correspondent, Ike Siemens, to take us on a memorable journey back in time.
You know, it's hard to believe. I got my start here almost 30 years ago, Bob. I can't believe that. And the things that I've seen happen to this station and this community are really amazing.
Well, you know, my service to South Florida began just a few months after the station signed on. And what a wonderful 50 years it's been. Back in 1949, Miami was a sleepy little place. It was about to wake up. WTVJ was born in the back lot of the old Capitol Theater at 316 North Miami Avenue, the brainchild of theater chain owner Mitchell Wolfson. Florida's first television station, the nation's 16th. Just 2,000 TV sets here to watch 2 hours of local programming a day.
I can recall when we had WTVJ as our only station.
I just remember the evenings when I watched the TV and you'd watch the color patterns, the test patterns, and you'd sit there looking at it like it was something that had just been invented.
Mr. Wilson,
Ralph Rennick was hired right out of the University of Miami as the first news director. But there was no regularly scheduled newscast. Despite that, he started the first coverage of hurricanes when one hit in 1949. Back then, they didn't have names, and we didn't have a weather department. I was just an intern at the time. WTVJ stunned South Florida when it carried the first live coverage of the Orange Bowl parade that year.
WTVJ has been sort of a hallmark in setting trends.
In the early 50s, we invented television, producing 125 hours of live shows each week. Network shows were shipped in up to a month late.
Gracie, what do you think of television?
Oh, I think it's wonderful. You know, I hardly ever watch radio anymore.
In 1950, the Korean War began, and so did the Ralph Rennick Report, our area's first TV newscast.
however, in a situation of this kind, you make up your own mind as to the validity and relative importance of the charges.
In 1957, Renick added the nation's first daily editorial on television. By 1950, I was a staffer and started the first weather report. But I also did news, wrote documentaries, announced, and a dozen other jobs. And so did Bernie Rosen, who started with me as an intern in 1949 and wound up as a nationally known sports director.
When you think back of the things we did, we had no contacts. We didn't know anyone. No one knew anything about television.
In the 50s, WTVJ had more firsts than the Yankees had world championships, the first ever broadcast from the Goodyear Blimp.
The blimp can only take 1,300 pounds of equipment. which means they had to take all of the equipment out of the blimp gondola and put just our TV equipment and the two lightest people that we could find.
We went to Sarasota to send back live pictures of the circus using the first mobile TV truck, the first underwater remote broadcast, the first to report on state government in Tallahassee, the first undercover report on illegal strip joints. For reporting on the Senate crime hearings in Miami, the nation's first achievement award from the National Association of News Directors, the first Orange Bowl game broadcast live. And we covered live all kinds of local sports, from wrestling to highlight. Skipper Chuck Zink's Popeye Playhouse was the first racially integrated kid show.
I'll get the door. Admit, bro, I'll just get the door here.
There was an accident down the street.
There was?
Yes.
Oh, what happened?
4th Street ran into 2nd Avenue.
WTVJ was one of the first news organizations into Cuba to report on the revolution and to pull Castro's beard.
Are you looking forward to shaving off your beard, or do you intend to keep it?
As atrocities continued, thousands fled Cuba, including Manolo Reyes.
Con su reporter Manolo Reyes.
Señoras y señores.
Rennick created the nation's first Spanish newscast on an English-language station for him in 1960.
At that time, there were 60,000 Cubans, penniless, sleeping on parks and sleeping on cars. And there was no mean of communication with the media.
This is Larry King.
Larry King got his first solid TV experience here when he was hired to do special reports and interviews. Did you have any idea that what you had started in this television studio would lead to where you are today?
I had no idea in the world. I pinch myself every day, Ike. But I give a lot of credit to North Miami Avenue and what they always let me be me. I never had management strong, come down on me. They liked my style.
In 1967, Jane Chastain became the nation's first woman television sportscaster, local or network. And in 1968, C.T. Taylor was hired as South Florida's first African-American reporter. In 1975, WTVJ was the first South Florida station to have the Live Eye videotape camera. It could broadcast instantly from anywhere, live.
Going to tape where you could instantly see if you had it or not was a major revolution in the news business.
American tourism in Havana. In 1977, I was the first South Florida journalist to be permitted inside Cuba since 1960. And Ana Asqui became the first Cuban-American woman reporter here.
And the switch is on with NBC.
In the 1980s, WTVJ became the first network owned and operated station here when NBC bought it. And the Pope visited Miami in 1987. The station made history by putting a mini camera inside the Pope mobile. In 1995, WTVJ became the first local station to switch channel numbers, going from 4 to 6. Now, WTVJ will become the first local station that has responded to the dramatic growth of South Florida by creating a regional communications center in Miramar while keeping a major news operation in Miami. With this regional concept, we become the first network station to locate in Broward County. And WTVJ will be the first digital TV station here. To you, that means the best and sharpest picture and the best sound ever. The closest to real life as we can make it.
But there's one thing that won't change from the old days, the way we cover the news in South Florida. Only the sunshine covers South Florida better than WTVJ.
Something, huh?
I'll tell you, and many more firsts as we move into the new millennium. You look back at that video, the old film clips in particular, and the memories you must have.
There are millions, but we don't have time.
There's one story I know that you love to tell that's a great story about a little technical glitch you used to have when you did the news with 3x5 cards.
Well, this was one of the funniest things that happened, and I just tell you how it worked. In order to do news then, we had no wires and we had no satellite pictures. So what we did, we cut stuff out of magazines and everything and pasted them on 3x5 cards.
Hey,
so
why not?
When we had a story, for example, we had a plane crash one day. So I looked in my file and found an airplane that had crashed. It wasn't the one, but I put that in the projector. But the problem was the projector had a very hot light, and sometimes it would melt the glue. So while I'm talking about this plane that had crashed, it started to come off the backing and kind of flew away. But that's just one of the many, many things that happened through the years, that build a television station.
It's sure that, Ike, you've become quite a historian, looking through the old video and through our old archives. Did you know that he used to recreate horse races?
Oh, yes. Yes.
And go into the booth upstairs.
Right.
And recreate the race. And probably, in many cases, did it better than the track announcer did it the first time.
Well, this historian thing, I've always enjoyed that kind of stuff. That's what I do in my spare time, read histories. But looking through this old stuff, finding that shot of a guy, one of our reporters saying to Castro, now that you've taken over, you're going to shave that beard? But,
exactly.
I was talking to the producers. They couldn't believe it. I sent them a memo the other day about, we're going to do more specials. And they said, Ike, I got your memo about the other specials, your ideas. You sent this at 4:10 in the morning. And I did that last Thursday. I get so wound up in this stuff and so passionate about it. I jumped up out of bed and ran into my little office at home and typed it up. Yeah, I love it. And when we do more of these specials, you're going to see more of this stuff.
And it comes through. I think that's what we like to think separates us from a lot of other people who do this type of thing, and that there's a tremendous amount of passion. And without your leadership back in those days when people didn't even think television would make it.
Well, we didn't either back then.
The thing that I get about watching these guys is that, these guys not only invented it, they had the freedom to just do it. And to think what they did, it blows my mind.
It does. WTVJ programs have always spotlighted our dedication to serving South Florida. Does the show Skipper Chuck, or how about Popeye Playhouse, bring back memories for you?
For a lot of people. We're also going to talk about two men who dedicated their lives to this community and this station. But first, Bob Weaver explains another unique problem that the station had getting on the air one night.
We had a fellow here named Wimpy Hutchinson, and he was a good friend of mine. Now, the projector is where the film would run, see, and it had these little sprocket holes. And so one day, we're watching this film, and he bent down to do something, and all of a sudden the screen went white, and you saw the hair coming down. He got his hair caught in the projector, and I was sitting in the announce booth, so I just opened the mic, and I said, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have a slight delay in the program. Our projectionist caught his hair in the projector.
My parents always told me that, you need to watch the news to find out what's going on in your community because you live here.
The experience of Tony Segreto.
Anybody can come into this town, sit behind the desk, and talk about community news. But there are very few people who can talk about it with an authoritative understanding. It's a huge responsibility that I don't take lightly. And neither does anyone else here at NBC6.
Experience NBC6 News tonight.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gloria Estefan, and I want to congratulate WTVJ NBC6 for 50 fantastic years. May you have 50 more.
And welcome back to our 50th anniversary special. As we showed you a few minutes ago, WTVJ first broadcast live out of the Goodyear Blimp back in 1950 to celebrate our first anniversary.
Well, tonight, Sky 6 is live with a special message for us because that's right, the Blimp is back in the air to wish us a happy 50th. As you can see, in fact, the pilot was the same man who took Bob Mayer up many years ago for the first ever live Blimp broadcast. We want to thank the Goodyear people and Goodyear Blimp for being part of our special tonight. Isn't that great?
Exciting to see that, huh? That's terrific.
Great look over downtown Miami. As Jennifer said earlier, welcome back to the 50 years of WTVJ. These days you can choose from thousands of TV programs on hundreds of channels.
That was certainly not the case back in the early days. In fact, there were 4 networks. This station was all of them.
Yeah,
Imagine that. Getting those network shows wasn't that easy.
Well, Ed Odell is here to show us what the station aired back then. And after 27 years here at my high school, buddy.
27.
He and I went to high school together at Archbishop Curley High School.
We're still here.
And we're
Thank
still
you very
here.
Much. Thank you very much. We have a lot of memories. It was quite a bit different. I came here, you'd already been here for 4 years. Now, when we think of programs today, it's usually talk shows, sitcoms, or shows like ER. That was not the case when WTVJ signed on 50 years ago tonight.
You ought to be ashamed of yourself.
Riley, you dope! Oh, this beats
It was not pretty, even by 1949 broadcast standards. It was, however, pretty amazing when WTVJ's programs premiered in about 2,000 South Florida homes.
Sir, are you nervous?
If you think Don Knox was nervous, the station's founder, Colonel Mitchell Wolfson, had reason to be worried about network programs. In those days, they were poor quality, shipped by mail from New York. They were often weeks late if they arrived at all. So Colonel Wolfson guided the station and his just-out-of-college news director, Ralph Rennick, towards a 50-year commitment to quality community-based programming.
From our beginning, we were aware of the public service potential of television.
Nice, bright, sunshiny day.
WTVJ, inviting you to enjoy your favorite shows and TV personalities on South Florida's Pioneer Station.
During the early 50s, there were cooking shows and game shows, poetry readings, and shopping guides. With its roving live truck, WTVJ broadcast everything from church services to wrestling matches, to University of Miami home games, plus 6 high school games on Saturdays.
It was difficult at the beginning, but we made it go. We never gave up.
Bernie Rosen was hired in 1950 as WTVJ began expanding local programs. During those days, sports had 10 minutes, Bob Weaver's weather, 5 minutes, and Rennick's news, just 15 minutes, each in separate shows. But as South Florida grew and world events collided, our programming would once again evolve to better serve the community. Series like Bumper to Bumper spotlighted the need for a system of highways and led to the building of I-95. A community's concern about juvenile delinquency uncovered in our troubled youth.
These kids don't do just straight jitterbug as we see it here, but something called the dirty boogie.
But it wasn't always gutsy reporting on the hard story that tied WTVJ to the community it served.
The most important thing this morning is the weather.
In 1957, WTVJ managers assigned replacement weather anchor Chuck Zink to develop a children's show.
We have a brand new president for the Pink House, Winnie the Pooh.
No one can imagine the impact Popeye Playhouse would have on the community. For 2 decades, South Florida children, their parents, teachers, and talent of all types clamored for the peace, love, and happiness of Skipper Chuck.
I hear another knock at the door.
You hear another knock at the door? I don't even...
There it is.
I get this feedback from those kids who are now growing up, who I can't tell you the times that they will say, you know, you told me never to quit. You told me to, you know, straighten up and fly right. And I tried, and I did.
From the late 1950s through the early 80s, Skipper Chuck educated and entertained future viewers. During the same period, Ralph Rennick's editorials offered more mature viewers food for thought. WTVJ's relationship with the community would lead to the creation of the Public Affairs Department. The program FYI, for your information, covers topics important even today.
Well, I did about, 8 years of monthly documentaries called FY every Tuesday night, I think. We did a half-hour documentary. So we covered the landscape, marijuana, Vietnam, Miami. I did the first program ever on heroin addiction here.
In 1972, WTVJ would embark on the most ambitious community program in South Florida television history.
This is Montage.
Montage put all the best WTVJ learned about programming for the community under one umbrella.
Crime on Miami Beach made headlines.
Veteran producer reporters like Diana Gonzalez developed many documentaries on crime, the environment, health, and entertainment, to name a precious few. Through 3 anchors, Ralph Rennick, Joe Abril, and finally this reporter, this town showed its appreciation by making Montage the highest-rated public affairs program in the nation for more than 2 decades.
We had a commitment from the owner, Mitchell Wolfson, who made it possible, first of all, who understood that good journalism is good business, and good business is good for a community.
The good business, good journalism, good for the community of Montage and WTVJ programming, still following the model created by founder Mitchell Wolfson in the beginning. That tradition recognized by professional awards gathered over a half-century. And while programs like Montage, FYI, Skipper Chuck, and Rennick's editorials, like time, have gone by, WTVJ programming has once again evolved. Our present-day commitment to more than 32 hours of news each week, half-hour and hour-long specials on a moment's notice, continue a tradition established when WTVJ premiered 50 years ago tonight. You know, one thing I learned in doing this, if you think about it, you keep hearing us say Ralph Rennick and Bernie Rosen and Bob Weaver, they started it all. They had an awesome power. And in the wrong hands, it could have been detrimental, but it helped South Florida grow. The one thing I picked up from watching all of this incredible footage.
Can I say it?
Okay, go ahead.
You haven't changed a bit.
Not true. The beard, if I grew it, would be great.
I was going to say, a lot of people might not recognize that was you with Skipper Chuck.
Yes, it was. Skipper Chuck gave me one of my first opportunities on the air. My first appearance was actually Mr. Prize Hand.
Mr. Prize Hand?
A hand that came from behind a French door and Limbo Lion.
So you were the first it.
Okay, exactly. Thing.
And it was interesting. Limbo Lion turned and said, Mr. Prize Hand, you got a tan. I haven't seen it. Okay,
well, it's funny.
First time on the air.
I've told Jennifer this many times. Ed, like I said, Ed and I went to high school together, and Ed does now obviously serious reporting, certainly on our children's education, but in high school he was voted the funniest guy in the class.
Well, you know,
things have changed.
It stood me well since then. It's been great being here, and hackneyed phrase with television has been very, very good to me.
Yeah, it's been good to all of us. Okay, Edwin, thank you.
So fun to look back at that. Meanwhile, WTVJ's history is more than just programming. Our list of alumni reads like a who's who in television today. People like network anchors Katie Couric and Jose Diaz-Balart, and interviewer Larry King, as you saw, who recently sat down with senior correspondent Ike Siemens to talk about his time right here in our studio.
You know, Larry, this is really ironic. I am in the WTVJ studio. I am told in the exact spot where you used to do your interview segment. I mean, how ironic is that?
North Miami Avenue, 3rd and 4th Street. I used to go there during the week, at night. We would, anytime any famous person came to town for a news weekend, we were on orders that we would do them. And so I did Arthur Schlesinger at 3 in the morning, and we did Paul Newman at 10 in the morning, and everyone who was everyone, Richard Nixon at 5 in the afternoon.
Was this station a national pace setter in the way it covered news and the way it went after news in a big-time way?
Well, I would have to say, honestly, outside of New York and L.A. stations, O&Os owned by networks, was at that time, your Channel 6 now, Channel 4 then, the most famous local television station in America. You told me something once that I never forgot. We were out having lunch at Miami Marina. And you said, you know something about Miami? It's the best local news town in America. That is still true. It is still the best. Channel 4 had guts. Channel 6 now.
Well, Larry, I'll tell you, I want to really thank you for talking with us. And for those of you who've never met Larry, Larry King, never forget you. I met him when I was a young reporter. He was a big shot then. He knew my name at that time.
If you forget people when you get up, they're going to forget you on the way down. I always thought you were a terrific reporter, Ike. I'm glad you're back doing it. I'm sorry you left the scene for a while. I'm glad you're back, and it's great to be part of this tribute for Channels 4 and 6.
Larry, I guess there's only one thing left to do, and you knew this was coming. It's going to be used over and over again in breaks and teases. It's like, happy 50th anniversary, Channel 6. Can I hear you say it?
You bet it. Happy 50th, Channel 6, 50 more.
Larry King, one of a kind.
What kind? Larry King, and we hope there's 50 more. And one of my first jobs here, we talk about getting those interviews with Paul Newman and Richard Nixon, would be to get the coffee and the makeup to bring to the set for those interviews. So,
you were an intern who started here. You also shot a little camera. We're going to talk about that later.
We'll talk about that later.
And Larry King, of course, spends a lot of time in Miami.
He sure
so
does.
Comes back a lot. Well, one man founded the station, the other became its best-known image.
When we come back, remembering Colonel Mitchell Wolfson and Ralph Rennick. Rennick made his mark every night at 6. Skipper Chuck Zink is still making his.
The latest happened to me about a month and a half ago. I played in a golf tournament, and in the evening at a dinner at this country club, and a lady came over and said, "Hi, Chuck." And I said, "Hi, how you doing?" She says, "Good. Just want to wish you peace, love, and happiness." And I said, "Thank you, Chris." Chris Everett.
The first station to bring you news is now the first station to bring you e-news.
6 by 6.
The 6 top headlines, weather, Wall Street, and the night ahead. Delivered to your home or office by 6 p.m.
6 by 6.
For your free subscription to 6 by 6 e-news, log on to nbc6.wtbj.com.
Congratulations to Florida's first television station for 50 fantastic years of broadcasting excellence. Happy anniversary, WTVJ.
And welcome back to this NBC6 special. You know, many of us take watching television for granted. Actually, for us, it's always been there.
But quite a few people actually grew up without it and then spent decades watching one man tell you what was happening in the world. And that man, of course, was Ralph Rennick. Rennick was brought in by the station's founder, Colonel Mitchell Wolfson. Wolfson wanted the station to adhere to 2 principles: service to the community and excellence in journalism. Principles I'm happy to say we still adhere to today. Ralph Rennick exemplified those principles every time he went on the air.
Bob Mayer is here now with a look at Ralph Rennick on and off the set.
And you know he was 2 different guys, Tony.
Very, very well.
Ralph Rennick was a towering figure and a boyhood idol of mine. I knew by the age of 9 that somehow, some way, I would one day work for him. Here's a look back at what Rennick meant not only to our community, but also to me personally.
WTVJ, Miami, South Florida's largest daily circulation. The Ralph Rennick Report.
For South Floridians, Ralph Rennick was much more than just a news director and television news anchor.
Now here's Ralph Rennick.
To South Florida, Rennick was television news, #1 for more than 35 consecutive years. Rennick was true to his professional values despite the glamour of the business and his own personal stardom. But he was aloof within the walls of WTVJ and conjured at least nervousness, sometimes fear, in the hearts of those who worked with him, me included. Just listen to the way the man talked.
He's not yet Time Magazine's Man of the Year.
And that's the way Ralph talked in person, too. Those in the know knew that if you ever wanted anything of Rennick, a favor, a raise, you had to get him out of the station. Once you got him outside the station, Ralph Rennick was a completely different person. Warm, friendly, even funny. Rennick was an imposing figure who dominated the room, any room, when he walked in. Lobbyist Seth Gordon said it best during a Ralph Rennick roast in 1985.
Ralph interviewed 7 United States presidents. It was never totally clear who was granting whom an audience.
Yes, Ralph smiled, even laughed, but again, rarely on the air. He worked hard on his no-nonsense image. He knew he was an icon, not only to our community, but also to journalists around the country, and especially in our own newsroom.
And now, Ralph Rennick reports the news.
When I started working for this station, I mean, you had to come up to a standard before you ever got anywhere. I mean, you know, they were always looking over your shoulder. It was like, and you tremble.
More than anything else, Rennick's legacy, his professional values, continue to be passed down by those of us who had the honor of being hired by and working with him. Or should I say, for him. Rennick had a knack for spotting talent.
He gave people the opportunity. You know, he hired me. I had no television experience. I had no videotapes to show him. I had nothing to show him except me. And he bought it.
Congressman and 2 admirals.
Here's Ike's first report, and I shot it. Ike got his chance. I got mine too. But Rennick was no pushover. I had to beg a year for the chance to anchor. 3 more years to get my own show. 7 more for Rennick to allow me to sit in for him on the 6 o'clock news.
The Ralph Rennick Report. Now here's Bob Mayer.
It was a momentous occasion for me, but it came with a condition, that I put white powder in my hair to look older. I sure don't need that now.
Bob Mayer for Ralph Rennick. Thank you for joining us. Back tonight at 11.
At the time, I would have put red powder in my hair if it had gotten me in Rennick's seat.
It is my decision, effective tonight, to step down as Vice President and News Director of WTVJ and also relinquish my duties as newscaster, editorialist on this program.
When Rennick finally left his anchor chair in 1985, his public recognition was never higher.
Weaver, you're the only one left here. What's happening?
I'm going to miss you.
Yeah. You have nobody to bounce your jokes off.
Rennick remained so popular that when he died in 1991, it was the lead story on every South Florida station.
Good evening. A South Florida broadcasting legend, the man who anchored the news from this very studio for 35 years, is dead.
But the Ralph Rennick way lives on, not only in the street named for him, but in the ideals he shared with Mitchell Wolfson and passed down to us. What would Rennick say if he were here tonight? His mother, Rosalie, has an idea.
He believed that serious news should be given seriously, not in laughter and making fun. There's a time for that. But as you know, he was very serious all his life.
And there's one more thing Ralph would have said for sure.
Good night. May the good news be yours.
As NBC6 enters the 21st century in a new cutting-edge facility, we take with us what Ralph Rennick stood for: honesty, fair, and accurate news coverage.
In fact, as we said earlier, it's what the station's founder insisted on from day one. The son of a Russian immigrant, Mitchell Wolfson was born in Key West. The man who would go on to found Florida's first television station earned his success the hard way.
The main characteristic that I consider Colonel Mitchell Wolfson had was his compassion, and he loved the community. The love of the community was tremendous.
That commitment crystallized in the birth of WTVJ.
Highlights of WTVJ news coverage.
Wolfson was tireless in his dedication to our community.
And this opportunity you have here in this wonderful Miami-Dade Community College will enable
The Colonel insisted Miami-Dade Community College have a campus downtown, and today it bears his name.
Our community, as well as many others across the nation.
And Wolfson's legacy lives on in yet another arena, the Wolfson Media History Center, named for Mitchell's son Lewis. It houses more than 10 million feet of news film, much of it shot at WTVJ over the past 50 years. It's an amazing archive of our history, one that stands to impact and influence our future.
They can learn about their history. They can learn about the way things were in Miami, in South Florida, and around the country through the eyes of Florida. And that lesson could be used for today's, issues and events.
So wonderful to see that old footage. We were actually the only television station on the air in South Florida for 7 years, which is really quite incredible. What do you think of when you reflect back on the days when Ralph Rennick reigned the news in South Florida and compared to today?
Well, Ralph Rennick, of course, was #1 for all his years on the air, and WTVJ was #1 in news coverage for the reasons we've set forth, because of the philosophy of Rennick and Wolfson. And I think what's exciting now is that we have returned to those ideals. Yeah. That's where we're headed for. And I think it's easy when you compare our news broadcasts to the other news broadcasts in town, that we're the ones with the solid journalism, and we're the ones without the hype, the sex, the violence, the blood. There's a big difference. And
absolutely. And there's no question that if you hearken back, and if you were to take an old Ralph Rennick report and look at a newscast now, you can see the ideals and the philosophy still the same. And you can't help but get a little goose leather, a little apple in the throat when you look at some of this stuff. It really is something special, Bob. Thanks.
Thanks, Bob.
Well, as we showed you, the Wolfson family name is on a television library filled with thousands of hours of film and videotape. And from time to time, WTVJ veterans, as you can see there, Bob and Ike, would hold seminars around South Florida to talk about where television has been and where it's headed in the new millennium. You know, sports has played a big part in South Florida's past, and mine, that's coming up, plus a surprise guest.
And we're also going to talk about the weather. Names like Donna and Andrew have come and gone. The name Bob came and stayed. First, how Ralph Rennick's mom first saw him on the air back when television sets cost more than cars, and she didn't have one.
Opposite this station, there was a Jefferson store that they sold televisions and whatnot. So after I'd come to the cafeteria across the street, I'd go over there and stand outside with the rest of the people listening to Ralph Rennick on the news. May the good news be yours. That was the end. And I was proud.
This station is a place that's always been known for integrity.
The experience of Jennifer Valapi.
We have a history, a reputation for putting honesty first, putting fairness and accuracy first. And that's what we're all about. And I think that's a reason to watch for most people. You may not get a lot of hype, you may not get a lot of sensationalism, but that's not what we're about. Never was.
Experience the difference of NBC 6 News.
Hi, I'm John Cicada, and congratulations to Florida's first television station for a wonderful 50 years. Happy 50th, WTVJ.
Back when WTVJ signed on, Miami was a rather small town. Here's a view of our skyline of sorts a half a century ago.
And what a difference 50 years makes. The Magic City looks pretty spectacular tonight, doesn't it? Dayton and Broward are now home to many of America's leading corporations.
And on Key Biscayne tonight, some of the greatest in tennis are taking part in the Lipton.
50 years ago, there was no Lipton or any pro sports for that matter. There was the Hurricanes, high school sports, and a broadcast pioneer with a vision. Right here, Bernie Rosen.
It's a whole different ball game now.
Thank you.
Back in 1949, there were no Dolphins, no Heat, no Marlins, and no Panthers. But there was WTVJ Sports and producer Bernie Rosen.
I can't even tell you how many times we covered marble tournaments.
They were like sort of like hometown, and they covered all the sport.
If you like ESPN, Sports Center, and CNN Sports at Night, and Sports SI, and all, Bernie started that. Bernie was the one that would get in a 4-minute sportscast 12 filmed stories. He believed in getting out and showing pictures. He thinks an anchor just sitting giving you sports was silly.
Getting out included showing the feature races at Hialeah 2 afternoons a week. Hialeah, boxing, and wrestling from the Gables Coliseum were shown at night, but University of Miami football and minor league Miami Marlins baseball games got the most airtime back then. By the time the 60s rolled in, big-time sports and big-time champions were converging on Miami.
You tell everybody bet this fight, and if you want to lose your money, then bet on Sonny.
I tell you, a great era was the Muhammad Ali era. And he was, when he first came down here in 1960, he was Cassius Clay. He lived in a little apartment in Overtown.
Because I was a true champion all the time.
Every Wednesday night, Muhammad Ali and his trainer, Angelo Dundee, would come here to WTVJ. And one of my first jobs as an intern back in 1968 was to take them in a room with that projector, a Bell and Howell, and string up their training sessions and previous fights. They would sit there and analyze those fights. Little did I know back in '68 as an 18-year-old, the impact that Ali would have on the boxing game. The Dolphins arrived in 1967. So did Jane Chastain. WTVJ hired America's first female sportscaster despite the obstacles.
Jane Chastain, Channel 4 News.
Even the great and gracious Joe DiMaggio had his doubts.
He said, I don't do any interview with women. So she said to him, are you going to be happy if when I go back and tell my boss that you wouldn't give me an interview because I was a woman and get me fired? Would that make you happy? So he kind of thought a little bit and said, okay, I'll give you an interview. So she talked to him for about a minute and a half, and then he said to her, you know, you really do know a lot about sports, and then gave her a heck of a good interview.
I was her photographer and saw the battles that she had to overcome and the hurdles she had to overcome. And her just keeping a focus and moving ahead, believing in herself, her ability, very religious woman, and one who said, you know what, I can do this. And she did. And she did it so well, so well. In the early 70s, I was officially on board as WTVJ showcased South Florida's newest set of heroes, the 1972 Miami Dolphins, who pulled off the only perfect season in sports history.
That was everybody chipping in and having that great year and doing something that nobody's ever done before, nobody's ever done it since, and maybe not will ever have that opportunity.
WTVJ became the first station ever to introduce the extended weekend sports report with Sunday Sports Final. And with over a dozen professional and college teams in town, WTVJ once again became a pioneer, adding Saturday Sports Final. My, how times have changed.
Hello, everybody. Waited his time, waited his turn. He didn't dress a lot, but...
With 50 years in the books and an era of new arenas and future championships set to begin, WTVJ's commitment to local sports coverage continues. Nice to go back to the old neighborhood. Bernie Rosen is joining us, and we have a surprise for you. Jane Chastain. Let's bring her in. Jane, live from Los Angeles. Hi, Jane.
Hello, and a special hello to my father and my little brother in broadcasting, Bernie Rosen and Tony Segretto. It's great to be with you today on WTVJ's 50th anniversary.
Well, this is really a surprise, Jane. I'm really surprised. I'm happy that I was able to put the first woman on. I was happy to put Tony Segretto on. This is a wonderful, wonderful night.
Well, Bernie, I'm sure Tony feels the same way that I do. There is nothing that I have ever done in broadcasting that I haven't carried some of you with me.
Well, Jane, it's an emotional moment here right now because, as you said, he seems to be everybody's dad. But how about can we just change the focus a minute? And do you recall the time that you and I were coming back from Sebring and we got stopped by a police officer and he arrested us because you offered him your credit card to see if you could pay for the ticket?
How did we ever get out of that one? I don't know. There we were, two city slickers from Miami, and we were coming across some desolate area, and they saw WTVJ's car with the Miami license plate, and they figured they had two hot ones, Tony, and I think they were going to arrest us no matter what. But I don't think you and I think we'd been on the road covering the race up there, and I don't think we had $10 between us. And so I was desperate. I offered them my credit card.
Jane, considering you had so many firsts here, I think you were the first woman allowed on a major league playing field, among many other things. You look back on those times, were they frightening? Were they exhilarating? Well, what's your reflection?
Well, at the time, I just put my head down and went to work. And I guess being the first woman, I knew that I had to work harder. I had to ask better questions. I just had to have the staying power. And I will tell you, though, that when I arrived at WTVJ, I had been in sports for 6 years at that time. It was very scary coming to Miami. We went there because of my husband's business and not knowing if I would have a home. I mean, look at the odds. There are 3 television stations. But when WTVJ wrote back, I mean, I didn't look any further because WTVJ was the place to be. And when I met Bernie Rosen, I had no idea the impact that this man would have on my life, the station would have on my life. And I really grew up. I really learned what it meant to be a good reporter at WTVJ. But at the time, no, I think you just put your head down and you just look at the task ahead and you just go for it. And as Bernie put it, when I went up to interview Joe DiMaggio and he did not want to be interviewed by a woman, I mean, the fate worse than death was to come back without the interview that Bernie Rosen sent you to do. Tony can tell you about that, right, Tony?
Oh, yeah, Jane, you're right.
I mean, anything was better than that. I don't know if you were with me the day that he sent me out to interview Steve Prefontaine.
Oh, yeah, I was with him.
We were together. He had not done any interviews. He was not doing interviews. But there was no way we were going to come back without it. And so I remember calling him on the phone and saying, Steve, I'm Jane Chastain from WTVJ. I'm here to interview. Would you like me to come up or would you like to come down? And he was so taken aback. He says, I'll come down. But we didn't dare, neither one of us, come back without what Bernie Rosen sent us to get.
Well, Jane Chastain, it's great to see you. You look wonderful. We miss you. We think of you often. And I think of the day that you said, you know what, you ought to go on the air.
Yes, and that was a very, very special day. I think it was a special day for Bernie, too.
It sure
and Tony,
was.
I am so proud of you. And Bernie, I am so grateful to you for everything that you taught me and for all that you've meant to my life.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you very much.
Okay, Bern. Great job. Whoever thought we'd sit on the set together, huh?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, Jane, thank you.
Well, I'll tell you, many people probably had no idea who Bernie Rosen was until just a few minutes ago, and Bernie is someone we all love dearly around here. You heard the influence that Bernie had on the sports world. Take a look at how Larry King greeted Bernie earlier this week when they saw each other for the first time in just about 20 years on satellite.
Come here, hey, Larry, come here a minute. Yeah. Come here. Here, I want to show you. Here, come down here. Come down here. Come down, sit down.
Oh, my God, it's Bernie.
This is Bernie Rosen, ladies and gentlemen. He just told me you were the greatest sports director in the history of television.
Hey, Larry. We're
Bernie.
Go back to the Miami Beach Kennel Club.
You going to go where?
There goes Rusty. Bernie Rosen, you're my hero.
You're his hero.
No.
Thanks. Great seeing you,
I'm
Bernie.
still around, Larry, and I'm
I
still
know,
kicking.
they told me.
Bernie's still around, all right. We're going to have to give him another retirement party. He's at 3 already. Now we're working on 4. You know, weather's been a part of South Florida's history since the very beginning.
From our sunny, rather dry winters to the wet, humid summers and the threat of hurricanes, WTVJ has helped viewers plan their day from the time we went on the air. Roland Stedham explains.
When it comes to covering the weather, a lot has changed over the last 50 years, and we're constantly updating the technology. Now, the machines that you see here behind me do everything from forecasting what temperatures are going to be like to tracking a hurricane. Keeping South Florida informed is part of WTVJ's continuing commitment to serving this community. It's a tradition started here half a century ago.
This is a very dangerous hurricane, packing winds of
From the beginning, South Florida has turned to WTVJ. Only a few months after signing on, we were already helping residents prepare for a hurricane. In those days, we guided you through King, Donna, Cleo, and Betsy.
I'm not sure if that was Betsy or not, the one that turned around and came back. But I was up for 3 nights, didn't sleep very much, and we gave the public everything they needed, everything they had to have. And I found out the nice thing about it was that the people really appreciated it.
When Andrew devastated South Florida in 1992, WTVJ was there once again, getting people prepared, talking you through the worst of it, working with the community to help rebuild.
Oh, careful, Doc. Okay, take a look around the corner. Now, this is very interesting.
And when we got a scare this past summer with George, our team was in place around the clock. Like hurricane season, another constant in this community is Bob Weaver. In the early days, he did it all. News, sports, weather, documentaries, even commercials.
This is from Alan Solo. On this date in history in 1879, Jack Lautrec became the first dentist to install a dental bridge. His patient said, however, too loose, Lautrec. Looking now at the rest of the information. I've never felt like a star. I've never felt like anything. People sometimes come up and say, oh, gee, a real-life celebrity. I've never felt like that. I still don't feel like that. I just feel like somebody who gets up there and purveys information to help these people get through their day or to know where the danger is and things of that nature.
Many South Floridians see him as a trusting neighbor, one who likes to have a little fun along the way.
You've come here, thank you all, and I'm not allowed to move from here, and so I'm just welcoming you all.
And as sure as the sun will rise, Wtbj the weather bird will be there to tell you all about it.
I was walking through a store one day. I remember the little birds used to have the little spring neck that was on the glass, and it would be gone like this. And I looked at that, and I said, you know, you could do something with that.
Weaver and his pet pal have seen a lot of changes over the last 50 years and are looking forward to forecasting in the new millennium.
The funny thing is I look back and I say, golly, 50 years have gone by. And they went by just like that. I mean, I was a kid out of school, and here it is 50 years later.
That's the weather. We'll be back after this.
You know, Bob, when I was a young man growing up in South Florida, I remember watching a weatherman standing behind this clear glass, and he would write the weather forecast, and it was written backwards, and that was you.
That's right. But what do you mean when you were a young man?
Can you still do it? Show us what you got there,
sure,
Mr. Weaver.
I can. Now, first, we used to do something like this. Okay?
W-A, and he can write in cursive. Look at that, ladies and gentlemen. He hasn't lost it. Whoop.
There you are.
Not bad.
And but you see, you may not be able to read it, but it would take a mirror to turn that around. But anyway, that's the way we did it. Now, for you young folks, You're going to have to learn to do that when these computers break down.
When they crash, yeah, exactly. They'll be calling Bob on the phone, saying, Bob, how did you do that?
Well, I'm sure you could.
All right, guys.
I got to tell you, I remember one date in history. Back in 1949, Bob Weaver used this. Back in 1949, there was a bicycle convention at the Fontainebleau Hotel. They only had one problem. They couldn't bring a spokesman.
Oh, no.
I remember like it was yesterday. Well, tonight we have given you a snapshot of our past.
Son of good joke. This morning we began celebrating our future. Jackie Nesprall is going to take us there next. But first, what a young intern, I've been waiting for this one, named Tony Segreto did when he first arrived at WTVJ.
My first real big job was to splice the film for the 6 o'clock sportscast. And that was huge. That was huge. It would take me about an hour and a half for 3 rolls of film, but I did it. I was painstakingly perfect on that.
Where can you find
NBC 6?
At your doorstep.
The Herald.
In your car.
87.7 FM.
At your office.
News Radio 610 AM.
On your desk.
NBC6.WTVJ.com.
In Spanish, in English, in your home. Wherever you are, whenever you need us.
NBC 6.
More partners, more experience than any other television news organization. Experience the difference.
NBC 6.
Happy 50th anniversary, WTVJ.
The WTVJ studios have been through a lot of changes over the last half a century. Welcome back to our studios, home to a lot of history and our current NBC6 newscasts.
And certainly, as we've told you tonight, there was a lot of anticipation before WTVJ signed on. Here's how the old Miami News reported our start. Quote, television comes to Miami like some spectacular circus clown. It is bubbling with optimism and certain to provoke curiosity. How prophetic that was.
And now we're bubbling with optimism about building 2 new television facilities. In fact, we broke ground this morning on our main campus, designed with you, the viewer, in mind. Jackie Nesprall is here to explain. Jackie.
Tony, bubbling is an understatement. We've shown you over the past hour how South Florida has grown in the past half a century. Well, WTVJ is expanding as well in downtown Miami and in booming West Broward. In fact, we spent this anniversary day breaking new ground. It's an exciting moment for one of South Florida's fastest growing communities, Miramar, and it's a milestone for the fans and family of WTVJ. What better way to mark our 50th anniversary than to break ground on a brand new station unlike any other in the country? For NBC6 and our viewers, what's going up on this piece of property is much more than just a building.
This isn't about a foundation built with concrete and steel. This is about a foundation that was laid 50 years ago by Colonel Mitchell Wilson, a foundation that was absolutely laid on service and commitment to our community and a commitment to excellence in journalism.
South Florida has grown a lot in the last 50 years, and we're making changes to serve Monroe, Dade, and Broward counties.
Because of the way we're putting the station together and we're building the facility, it's going to mean we're going to be able to respond to the events in this community quicker than we have been in the past, which means we should be more up to date, we'll have better weather, better news coverage.
Besides our new all-digital campus in Broward, look for another studio and facility in downtown Miami. It will be much like the Today Show's window on the world. With 2 new facilities in the new millennium, we're continuing the 50-year tradition to serve South Florida.
We're going to be able to better reflect our community by being centrally located.
So if you're driving along I-75, look for our new facility going up around the Miramar Parkway exit. And stay tuned for the big announcement very soon about our downtown Miami location. NBC6 is looking forward to being your hometown station for 50 more years. As a native like myself, it truly is an exciting time. Jennifer and Tony?
It really
Certainly
is, Jackie.
is.
Thank you.
Well, it's hard to believe this hour is over.
It's flown by, hasn't it?
It certainly has. We've only shown you a small portion of those incredible TV archives.
But don't worry, because this is really just the beginning. Every week over the next year, you will see more of those memorable moments, more specials like this one, and more stories about this community now and then.
We invite you to stay tuned as we prepare and move into 2 new television facilities and a new millennium.
And we look forward to bringing you the kind of journalism that WTVJ pioneers Mitchell Wolfson and Ralph Rennick first started. And we thank you for bringing us into your home and allowing us to serve you over the past 50 years.
And as we say goodnight tonight, as Ralph Rennick would say, good night, everyone. May the good news be yours as we take a look at the Goodyear Blimp, wishing us a happy 50th anniversary.
Good night, and may the good news be yours.
To purchase WTVJ 50th anniversary merchandise, visit our website at www.nbc6.net.